Hello, everyone. My name is Kwesi Willacy, and welcome to my presentation on Ruan versus the United States. So, to give a brief background of this historical Supreme Court case, we have to talk about the people involved. And I'd like to talk about first one of the doctors who was named on the case, Dr. Silu Ruan. So, Dr. Ruan is a owner or was an owner and operator of two clinics and a pharmacy in Mobile, Alabama, who eventually was convicted with violating the Controlled Substances Act and violating the RICO Act, and running a pill mill. In addition to that, he was charged with prescribing Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 substances, that are controlled substances, including fentanyl, without a legitimate medical purpose. And also, some of the evidence pointed to the fact that he wrote over 474,000 prescriptions for pain management for cancer, specifically because the medication was for cancer. But in investigation, it was found that less than 15% of his clinic clients were actually cancer victims. So eventually, Dr. Ruan was sentenced to 20 years in prison, in a federal prison, in 2017. Also, associated with this particular certiorari that was submitted to the Supreme Court was Dr. Shakil Khan. Now, Dr. Shakil Khan also owned medical clinics in Arizona and Wyoming, and was charged and convicted with violation of the Controlled Substance Act, along with other serious crimes. The evidence against Dr. Khan included thousands of prescriptions for which he made for controlled substances, and a lot of those seem to be illegitimate. In addition to that, a number of the prescriptions indicated that the quantity of pills prescribed was actually proportional to the amount of money, or what the patients could afford. And also, he created a barter system where he exchanged pills for firearms, cash, cars, etc. And even also, there was one source of information that stated that there were so many prescriptions written that some of the pharmacies in the area just flat out decided to not fill these prescriptions that were coming from Dr. Khan. This was in Arizona. He then moved to Wyoming, where he created another clinic and continued the same business practice as he did when he was in Arizona. So the law at the center of this historic Supreme Court case is the Controlled Substance Act of 1970. So the law, which is 21 USC section 841A and 1, which states that a person cannot knowingly or intentionally make, distribute, or dispense a controlled substance unless he or she is authorized to do so. So please bear in mind that this was originally created for drug dealers and not doctors. So in order to translate what this is in regards to doctors, please understand the key legal elements of this particular law and how they pertain to the case. So the first one is knowing and willingly, which is a mens rea, which pretty much, as we know, means criminal intent. Did the doctors have criminal intent when they made these, when they distributed medication, or also were they fully aware of the state of the patients in regards to their mental state or their scienta? How well did they know the situation that was going on? And also, um, in distributing the controlled substances, this would mean they wrote prescriptions, and authorization would mean that they're trained, licensed physicians, right? Or that's how it's eventually explained in the case, where it's translated from the law as it is written here to applicable to the cases as they were tried. So it was eerie how both cases, even though they were in different parts of the country, were so similar in the way that they were prosecuted. In both cases, the defense requested that a jury instruction included the mens rea requirement for the prosecution, to prove that the doctors knowingly and willingly provided a legitimate prescription. Now, what was interesting is in both cases, the request to include the mens rea was dismissed, and the court decided instead to implement the term goodwill, which is a more objective uh, interpretation of the law versus um, a subjective mens rea saying willing and knowing, whether or not those particular doctors, Dr. Ruan and Dr. Khan, willingly and knowingly wrote those prescriptions for their patients. Both appealed after they were subsequently dismissed. Both of them, they were subsequently charged. Both of them appealed at the 10th and 11th Circuit Court, 10th being in Alabama for Dr. Juan and 11th for Dr. Khan in Wyoming. And again, the appeal court sided with the lower court, stating that the knowing and willing mens rea is not a reasonable defense, and that also the mens rea, the goodwill term actually instead of the mens rea is the common practice in those circuits. So eventually the Supreme Court overturned the case and they said that the mens rea should apply. And in addition to that, the burden of proof now falls on the prosecution, where they need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these doctors, in fact, did commit the crimes that they were accused of. So there are quite a few current and probably future implications of this overturned case. One of which, ironically, is the overturned case of Roe versus Wade. This is significant specifically because when Roe versus Wade was overturned, the states now had a responsibility to create new abortion laws, which in some cases were quite extreme and punitive towards physicians who performed what's quote unquote illegal abortions. An abortion will be considered legal only if it is done to save the mother in terms of an emergency, wherein, again, the life of the mother is at risk. Um, Unfortunately, these laws are quite vague, and a lot of physicians flat out refuse to perform emergency abortions out of the fear of losing their license and also possibly being prosecuted and going to jail. So having this mens rea being recognized in the way that it is important as it can be applied towards the Roe versus Wade overturn situations that has occurred. In addition to that, new opioid medication guidelines were also released by the CDC, which are still somewhat um, very strongly worded and has not, according to research and study, has not really boost confidence of providers and pain management providers to prescribe medication to clients who need it, including cancer victims. New policies and protocols are also in place in a lot of healthcare organizations and private clinics in regards to who can prescribe these medications, why and how as well. In addition to that, the mens rea isn't really a get out of jail card for bad actors. In fact, what it really means is that the prosecutors have to do a keen job at making sure that they can prove, in fact, that the providers or the doctors writing the prescriptions in these cases are actually doing so without criminal intent, and also that they were doing this to help a patient who legitimately needed the medication. And just as consequence of a circumstance, interestingly, one of the doctors involved in the Supreme Court case, Dr. Khan, was resentenced recently for the same crimes that he committed years before. He was resentenced in December 2023 and is now in a federal jail. So thank you very much for listening to my case. Here are my references. And if you have any questions, please just let me know. Thank you.